folks. I'm Ezra. This is my colleague Lincoln. I don't know how you keep your energy high. 6 events. You're going to event number 7. It's got to be a blur. How do you stay high energy?
I'm guided by my purpose. I mean, if you're guided by why you're doing something, you're guided by the why, then you know what? The energy comes naturally. And 7 events, that's not a particularly heavy day.
Come on.
We've gone up to 11.
What?
Yeah, 11 events in a day is our peak so far.
Well, you're keeping remarkably lucid for 10 events a day. I see you have one of your kids with you. What's that like?
Yeah, it's great. I usually so my wife, she's a surgeon at Ohio State. She's a throat surgeon. She'll come out here Fridays through Mondays or on the campaign trail, wherever we are. One of the things I've found, though, is it's helpful for me in particular, and it's also good for our kids to have this experience, but staying grounded as a family. So sometimes I'll bring the older guy, sometimes I'll bring the little guy, and then we'll reunite on weekends. So that's how we've been making this work as a family. And I wouldn't say it's always logistically the easiest thing, but thankfully we've been still doing it together as a one team approach as a family. And it's been actually an incredibly rewarding experience to have a shared project with our kids, and to be able to do it this way is, I think, very grounding for me.
Well, he seems very brave. He wasn't shy about being out in public, and I don't know. I wonder if he understands the gravity of what's going on.
Yeah, I wonder too, actually. I think that my sense is, he could tell you I'm running for president. He could tell you that I care about freedom of speech. He's learning the Pledge of Allegiance. I think that he knows that we're doing something important, that his parents are taking the time to do something that they value, that is important and worthy, and that he's an important part of it. I think that much he processes for sure.
Well, it was pretty great to see him. Hey, let me talk about the subject matter. You had a trucker town hall where you really got into details. But for me, the way you described what happened in Canada and the Freedom Convoy of truckers and how Trudeau cracked down on it, you had a lot of info about the seized bank accounts.
Oh, yeah.
Were you following it? Why was Canada, which is normally sort of a boring subject for Americans, you knew more facts than I think many Canadians did?
Well, I was following it very closely at the time. Part of this is, so I was pushing back against what's called the ESG agenda in the United States, and I don't know if those
Sure,
words
yeah.
mean anything to you. Okay. So the use of financial markets to do through the back door what government could not do through the front door. I mean, I wrote 2 books about that in the last several years, and I started a company in the U.S. called Strive to push back against a lot of those ESG orthodoxies in corporate America. So, and I can go into, my world and what I was doing then. But when I saw what happened in Canada, first of all, I was dead set against any type of government top-down mandates anyway. I think that there's going on in the world what some refer to as the Great Reset, the dissolution of boundaries between the public and private sector, and even between nations, to impose a single hegemonic agenda that is in the design of supposedly making for a better world, and increasingly creates an autocratic, dictatorial, globalist hegemon. And so when I saw that land on the doorsteps of Canada, I had just started taking an interest in how some of the issues I was looking at in the U.S., like the ESG cancer, was really a transnational phenomenon. And so I went pretty deep into what ended up happening there. The weaponization of the financial system to be able to freeze bank accounts or access to bank accounts. That's what Trudeau used in an unprecedented move. I think that is in some ways a harbinger, a warning of what could come here to the United States if we're not careful on issues relating to allowing the ESG cancer to spread, the use of a central bank digital currency, something that's being debated in the U.S. It has profound implications for us here in the U.S. And so, yeah, you're darn right I paid attention to it.
You mentioned in your speech today the World Economic Forum, and I heard you just mention the Great Reset. That's one of their themes. It was a book by Klaus Schwab.
I actually can't remember. Yeah, no. That was one of his. He wrote 2 books. One was called Stakeholder Capitalism, and one that was called The Great Reset. I actually wrote a book review for the Wall Street Journal. They asked me to, of his book Stakeholder Capitalism, and so it was let's just say it wasn't a very charitable review, but I believe in being able to understand the best arguments for the other side, and I can tell you, it is far more frightening than the way it's caricatured. The real argument is more frightening than the caricature. It's the desire to impose effectively the old world European view, a rejection of democracy, a rejection of a self-governing republic, to say that people can't be trusted how to sort out climate change or COVID-19 or racial injustice for that matter. That can't be left to the people. It has to be a small group of aristocratic elites from the mountaintops of Davos that make that decision for everybody else. And I think the right answer and the right response to the Great Reset is what I call the Great Uprising on the other side, which says hell no to that vision. I'm a citizen of this nation, not some nebulous global citizen fighting climate change. That's what I think those Canadian truckers were saying. And I think that they were part of what I consider to be this transnational Great Uprising that's the response to the Great Reset.
You mentioned Trudeau in your remarks. You mentioned him again now. What do you make of the man? He's been in power for 8 years now, even though he has a minority government. He's got a coalition. Is he a cautionary tale for Americans? I don't think Americans follow Canadian politics too closely. What should an American know about Justin Trudeau?
This is a preview of coming attractions. I use that sarcastically, unless we course correct here. He's like a Klaus Schwab Jr., sort of a Klaus Schwab disciple. And I think that he is somebody who is a useful puppet. I mean, it's not that this guy is some sort of shining intellect that is somehow a visionary in his own right. He's not. He's a pawn for a managerial class, both within and outside of Canada, that uses people like him as a pawn to advance a transnational globalist agenda that has a single hegemonic view that is fundamentally skeptical of self-governance, does not believe in people's ability to govern themselves, believes in a worldview where people need to be told what the right way is or isn't to live by a small group of aristocratic elites in the back of palace halls. That was the old world European view. It's what's alive and well in Canada, unfortunately, today. And the idea that Trudeau's actually the guy calling the shots is a joke. He's just a puppet, a pawn for that deeper, what I would call permanent state. And I think that much similar to the United States, I think that that's a big part of what you're seeing happening in Canada now as well.
I don't want to take up too much of your time because I can only imagine you want to keep your energy for that last meeting. But let me ask you a question about the primaries.
And you're invited to the last one. You want to come to that last one? Just join us. Why not?
Well, sure. We're on our way, and then we'll.
I mean, you might as well. You're right here. Yeah.
Well, we'll consider us accepting your invitation. You used the phrase "America First." I heard in a little gaggle afterwards. You talked about making America great. Those are slogans that Donald Trump popularized in his first run. Trump has had very positive things to say about you, especially your debate performance. That said, Trump is way ahead in all the polls. I mean, the polls might be inaccurate, but it suggests he's out front. How do you run a primary where he is nominally, and on the ballot, he's your opponent, even though you seem to be carrying the torch for his ideas?
Well, I don't think they're his ideas. I mean, these are George Washington's ideas. And it's up to each of us to carry the torch forward, to take that further than George Washington did in 1796 when he left office. And so, yes, Donald Trump, I give him immense credit for a lot of his accomplishments in this country. But I think I'm going to be able to take that America First agenda that began with George Washington, that continued through Ronald Reagan, through Donald Trump, now through me, taking that to the next level. I think I have fresh legs. I think I'm able to reach the next generation in a way that he's not. And I don't mean to be cynical here, but let's also get very practical. I don't think this system, that permanent state, is going to let him get anywhere near that White House. And I think that may sound dark, but you look at what's happening in Colorado or in California or other states. I think anybody who thinks that it's just going to be a honky-dory, straightforward path that they even let Donald Trump get anywhere near that White House again, that existing establishment, I think that's a naive delusion, actually. And so it's my job anyway to stand for this agenda, take our America First agenda to the next level. I'll honor Donald Trump and his legacy. But I think there are forces at work in the United States that have determined not to let him anywhere near. And it's my responsibility to make sure that we have standard bearers who can take the America First agenda to the next level starting in 2024. That's what I'm in this race to do. And I think next year is going to be a complicated and turbulent year. I mean, that's the truth.
Last question. Nikki Haley, who I thought had no chance, seems to be rising. She seems to be the establishment Republican candidate around whom the elites are coalescing.
Yeah.
Do you take her seriously as a threat? And do you think she will be the anointed candidate of the official party?
I don't take her seriously in any sense. I mean, she's not really an independently thinking, functioning agent. She's a pawn. She's a puppet, propped up by what I think should be taken seriously, which is a permanent state, the deep state. And there are cronies in the mainstream media that have decided that this is going to be a useful pawn to advance their pro-war, corrupt, pro-censorship agenda in this country. And I think that's actually the dirty little secret here. Many of the people who were, before propping up the left, from Reid Hoffman to Larry Fink, they're now propping up Nikki Haley. So in some sense, they say, who needs Democrats when you have somebody like this running on the Republican Party? Same people who are trying to keep Trump off the ballot are the ones who are propping up Nikki. Interesting how that works. And so Nikki Haley's more or less irrelevant as an individual and as a human being. She's just another, old school corrupt class politician bought and paid for and looks to make money off politics. That's a familiar story. There's nothing new about that in American politics. But I think what is new is the level of aversion to Trump in particular that they've decided to coalesce and prop up this puppet. But I think all the more reason, I think that's the way this is going to go, is they're going to try to, I think one way this could go is they effectively, by hook or by crook, by hell or high water, decide Donald Trump, they're going to keep him out. You see the entire system conspiring to make that happen, trying to prop up Nikki Haley, who I think in many ways could be more dangerous to the future of this country than even many Democrats. Look at her pro-censorship agenda. Every social media account has to have your government-issued ID tied to it. Imagine that if that were tied to the Canadian truckers and a central bank digital currency. It's a worse world than Orwell could have imagined. Using our own money to ship money to Ukraine so that some kleptocrat over there can buy a bigger house. That's not America. And I think that I'm offended by what she and more or less the people who are propping her up represent in this country. And I'm going to make sure that nobody like that comes near the levers of power in Washington, D.C. Unlike others, I could make a clear statement and tell you she will come nowhere near being my vice president or anywhere near my administration. I can be clear about that. I'm not afraid to say that. And I think that that's a part of why I'm the proper standard bearer for taking our America First movement to the next level, because I can say that without hedging.
What happened to Ron DeSantis? He was such a golden governor. He was world famous as a freedom-oriented governor, especially during the lockdowns. His campaign hasn't really caught fire. What's your diagnosis?
I think Ron's a good guy as a governor. I think he should remain. I think it'll be good for the people of Florida if he remains as a governor. I think to be a president, you need to have a vision for where we're going as a country, not just executing somebody else's vision. And so, I respect Ron has been a good executor in the state of Florida, but I think when you think about who needs to lead this country, it needs to be somebody with an independent vision of who we are and what we stand for. That's why I'm in this race, and I think we're going to be successful.
It's great to meet you, and we'll attend your next event.
Thank you.